So I'm currently in Kansas City, and my mood was much better until I started going over a few of my games. It appears, I don't think this might be the game I'm going to show, but it appears some of the games have been a little bit, in terms of quality, they've been in deep need of improvements. So, okay, this was my second round of the Chicago Open, and I was paired up with the white pieces against I think his name was Aaron or something, started with an A, but a 1947. He also played one of the solid and annoying defenses known as the Caro Kann. So let's walk our way through this, and let's walk to the most annoying first 6 moves I can possibly deal with. So we have E4, C6, D4, D5. I decided this game to try and blow my little 1900 rated player off, or rated opponent off the board by playing in advanced, hoping that he falls into one of the many pitfalls of my special line. So I went E5, bishop F5, and pawn to H4. Now, obviously, one of the very obvious pitfalls is if he plays the move pawn to E6, then he is going to be promptly met with the move G4, H5, E4, and then pawn F3. But we're dealing with 1900s, and I think this weapon has only in the past been effectively employed against someone whose rating is probably low 1800s, like 1811. There are other tricks. There's definitely other traps, but returning to the main game, most of my opponents play the proper route. They play the move H5 so they don't have to deal with any of the opening challenges of this particularly dangerous move order. So after H5, there's 2 main moves. One that I used to play was pawn to C4. It's very complex, but one that I think was simple and effective that I currently play is the move bishop to D3. So after trading, we have queen takes, and then I did mention that this is one of the most annoying lines that I've encountered. It is when my opponent decides to, instead of playing E6, he decides to go with the queen A5 check first. I think this move was popularized by Magnus Carlsen, and against knight A5 or queen A5, the point is that he's hoping to provoke you with knight to C3 so that he can trade off queens with queen A6. If the queens don't come off the board, then white's forced to make a unproductive queen move. If the queens come off the board, we enter into an endgame that's precisely equal for black, and I improve his knight. So in response to queen A5, I like to play knight to D2. However, I do play knight to D2, even though there is the drawback that the knight on D2 boxes in the bishop on C1. So after knight D2, we have E6, knight GF3, and then queen A6. And had my knight been on the C3 square, I would not be able to counter the queen A6 idea with the move pawn to C4. So C4 was played, and then my opponent had surprised me with something that I did not expect, and it is weirdly playable, and actually it has some respectable players behind it. It's the move bishop to B4. In the past, my opponents had played either knight E7 F5 or bishop to e7 before playing knight e7 f5. Or I think it would be knight h6 f5, but I was normally accustomed to the bishop being developed to the e7 square, so I had a think here, and I was also thinking that my opponent had probably put in some time scouring the chess.com or chess 365 databases to see exactly how I would play the Caro Kann. I'm definitely going to think about going through those databases myself, just to give myself an idea of what I would expect if somebody was preparing for me. But in either case, we have a new position, and my opponent probably feels quite comfortable with it. So I played b3, he played knight e7, I have castles, and knight f5. Same type of position, the bishop just looks a little more awkward. Now the move I kind of regret not playing is the move rook to d1, because I was sort of trying to, the move I did play, which is not terrible, it was sort of undisciplined, because I have a new position, and I should try a new position that I don't really have much experience with, and I should try and play it as objectively as possible. And playing a4 is sort of like trying to transpose into the lines where the bishop's on e7, instead of playing what I believe is the most efficient move, which turns out to be rook to d1, which I spent some time. I spent some time trying to calculate it out and play it, but ultimately I settled for something that was sort of like, I guess, made me think I was within my comfort zone. So we have a4, knight to d7, and then queen to c2, which was a new move. The move I was actually considering a lot, but I was too, for calculating reasons, I was a bit too, I played a bit cautious when the move I was trying to make work was the move bishop to a3, and technically it does work, but it takes a lot of precise calculations to figure out how white can properly continue, even though after, say, let's toss this one in, after, say, takes on, because he's trying to win a pawn here, so takes on d2 and queen takes on d2, what compensation white has after giving up one of the pawns. And he does, but again, this was a tournament that I really did not want to risk, I guess, giving up another draw and pretty much taking myself out of the winner circle. So I went for something I thought was a bit safer. It was queen to c2, and afterwards I was met with castles kingside, bishop a3, queen a5, surprising. I thought he was going to take. And then I decided to go with takes, and a5 for the sake of trying to develop an initiative on the queen side. So after a5, the queen fell back. I played g3 to protect h4. And after f6, I got a bit nervous, but because I was starting to reflect on the disaster that happened in my game with Irene, where we pretty much had the same potential counterplay with f6, and it almost, I think I was pretty much forced to take, but the whole situation almost blew up in my face. It did, actually. I just was somehow able to save the game, and I thought this would be an ominous retelling of that story. So after f6, I took on f6. The queen took back. Calming moment. And then I think I I think I think this was a safe option for me as well. I should have played knight to g5, and I was definitely aware of the tactics behind this. If I play knight to g5, if the knight were to take on e4, then the game would end with queen to h7. And if I played, or if my opponent played queen takes on d4, then the game would be, I wouldn't say effectively over, but it would be over after knight takes on e6, picking up the exchange. So this was a little bit, this looks more like an oversight to me. But yeah, I played queen to d3, and after rook a to e8, the last oversight that I made that resulted in a position that was equal was me fixating too much on the danger that could happen if my opponent either was able to break through the center with e5, or could create some counterplay on the king side by bringing the queen to the g file. So the safe part of me wanted to prevent the break and play rook a to e1, even though I think it is suggested the best move is a6, and trying to build that initiative after b6 on the queen side with b4. So eventually we arrived at a position that is equal, and very equal, because black is actually he's actually threatening a discovery with knight takes on e4 and then queen takes queen. So this is where the game got a little bit fishy, just to give you an idea of what happened later on. We entered into an endgame where each of us had 2 knights and a rook. I had advanced queenside pawns and 2 very active knights that ultimately won me more pawns and eventually the game. I think I might be close to closing the book on playing the advanced Caro, but I suppose I'll have to wait until I take another L before I shift to simply playing the exchanged or the Panov version. Either ways, it was an interesting round 2.